You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art ed?
We'll try to spice it.
Who art ed? Mr. Wood art ed me.
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today I've got a TLDR mini episode about Paul Klee. Paul Klee was born December 18th, 1879. He was born in Switzerland, but spent a good part of his life in Germany. He's widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in modern art, associated with several major movements, including Expressionism, Cubism, and Surrealism. He was raised in a musical family, and Klee initially trained as a violinist before deciding to pursue the visual arts. In 1900, he moved to Munich to study at the Academy of Fine Arts. Early in his career, Klee worked primarily in etchings and black and white drawings until a pivotal trip to Tunisia in 1914, when he really began to embrace color. During the 1920s, Klee achieved significant professional success, serving as an influential faculty member at the Bauhaus school in Germany from 1921 to 1931, alongside his friend Wassily Kandinsky. At the Bauhaus, Klee developed extensive theoretical writings on art, which were later published as the Paul Klee Notebooks, considered as fundamental to modern art as Leonardo da Vinci's treatise on painting was to the Renaissance. The rise of the Nazi regime in Germany, though, forced Klee to leave his teaching position in Dusseldorf in 1933, as his work was classified by the government as, quote, degenerate art. He spent the final years of his life in exile in Switzerland, continuing to produce art despite suffering from scleroderma, a debilitating autoimmune disease. Klee's style is a combination of childlike simplicity, geometric structure, and some psychological resonance. He often mixed media, combining watercolor, oil paint, ink, and pastel on unconventional grounds like cardboard, fabric, or even newspaper. Over his lifetime, Klee created more than 9,000 works of art, leaving behind a rich legacy celebrated for the distinct style and use of symbols, including arrows, musical notes, and hieroglyphs that bridge the gap between pure abstraction and representational storytelling. Now, here are 5 quick things to know about Paul Klee. Number 1, Paul Klee was an accomplished professional violinist before he became a painter. Klee began playing the violin at age 7 and demonstrated exceptional talent early on. By the age of 11, he was invited to perform as a member of the Bern Music Association. His parents encouraged him to pursue a musical career, and throughout his adolescence, music remained his primary focus. But despite his immense talent for the violin, Klee chose to pursue visual art as a young adult because he felt there was no innovation in classical music. He believed that all the great musical compositions had already been written, but the visual arts offered him freedom to experiment and create something entirely new. Nevertheless, this musical background influenced his painting technique, as he frequently translated musical concepts like rhythm, polyphony, and counterpoint into visual structures. Number 2. A trip to Tunisia in 1914 completely changed Klee's approach to color. In April 1914, Paul Klee traveled to Tunisia with fellow artists Auguste Macke and Louis Moilliet. Prior to this trip, Klee had struggled to integrate color into his work. He primarily focused on line drawings and monochrome etchings. The intense, vibrant Mediterranean light and the geometric architecture of the Tunisian landscape led to kind of a sudden breakthrough. Klee wrote a famous entry in his diary stating, quote, "Color possesses me. I don't have to pursue it. It will possess me always. I know it. That is the meaning of this happy hour. Color and I are one. I am a painter." End quote. And he was true to his word. This 2-week trip marked a major transition from his early graphic style to the rich, abstract color grid compositions that would define the remainder of his career. Number 3. Paul Klee kept thousands of pages of lecture notes for his teachings at the Bauhaus. When Klee joined the faculty at the Bauhaus in Weimar in 1921, he took his instructional responsibilities very seriously. He was tasked with teaching the stained glass workshop and later bookbinding workshop, along with general courses on form and color theory. To prepare for his classes, Klee meticulously organized his thoughts, which gave us a wealth of nearly 4,000 pages of notes detailing his theories on mechanics, geometry, and visual dynamics. While his work seems very whimsical, his teaching style was highly structured and analytical. He taught his students that art was not just a passive imitation of nature, but rather a dynamic recreation of the natural laws of growth and movement. His famous quote, "A drawing is simply a line going for a walk," stems directly from his teaching efforts trying to break down art into its most basic elements. Number 4. The Nazi regime labeled Paul Klee's work as degenerate art and confiscated over 100 of his works. In 1933, the Nazi Party gained power in Germany and immediately targeted modern artists whose work did not align with their idealized aesthetic. Klee, who was teaching at the Dusseldorf Academy at the time, was deemed in Nazi newspapers as a degenerate, and his art was branded as subversive. He was promptly dismissed from his teaching position. In 1937, the Nazi government organized the infamous Degenerate Art exhibition in Munich, designed to publicly mock modern art. 17 of Klee's works were included in this exhibition. Also, German authorities systematically purged public museums, confiscating 102 of Klee's artworks from public collections across the country, which forced the artist to flee Germany and return to Switzerland permanently. And finally, number 5, Paul Klee suffered from a rare disease called scleroderma that drastically altered his style later in life. In 1935, Klee was diagnosed with scleroderma, a chronic systematic autoimmune disease that causes the hardening of the skin and internal organs. The condition made movement extremely difficult and painful, restricting his ability to execute the fine, intricate line work that he had done in his earlier masterpieces. Rather than stopping, Klee adapted his technique to accommodate his physical limitations. In his final years, he shifted toward much larger canvases, thick black outlines, simplified forms, and a heavier, more somber color palette. Despite his decline in health, Klee experienced an extraordinary burst of productivity in 1939, creating 1,254 paintings and drawings in just that single year. And now, as always, I'd like to take a closer look at a famous work by the artist, and with Paul Klee, one of the standouts to me has always been a twittering machine. I don't know why. I think probably because this is one that I actually found a poster of it in my classroom the first year that I was teaching. The art teacher before me had left behind some stuff, and this is one that just caught my eye when I was like in my 20s, and it's always captivated me. A twittering machine is an oil transfer and watercolor painting on paper mounted on cardboard. Now, when we look at it, it's sort of a minimal, sparse drawing. I mean, it's wire-like, 4 mechanical birds perched on a crank handle against this hazy, sort of multicolored, bluish-gray wash of a background. Klee made this when he was teaching at the Bauhaus. And for those unfamiliar, check the links in the show notes. I did an episode on the Bauhaus earlier, but the Bauhaus was really influential as an art and design school because it was breaking down barriers and encouraging a lot of experimentation. And there was a lot of engagement around the intersection of art, technology, and biological forms, which kind of makes sense when we look at this composition. There's this contrast between sort of delicate line work and just washes of colors filling the background. I mean, the negative space almost seems like he just like poured the watercolor onto there, allowing it to spread and drip like a Helen Frankenthaler kind of thing. We see these watermarks, particularly around like the edges, and the lines almost feel like a representation of a Calder sculpture or something. They feel more like wires than real drawings. You know, there are the organic elements, but also the birds are sort of reduced to a collection of lines, except for the heads. The heads are more fleshed out as shapes to give us the open beak, like they are singing, making some noise. But each of the birds is facing a different direction. They're not sort of singing in unison. They're all going their own way. And they're balanced precariously on this horizontal bar that connects to like a hand crank. And Klee sets this fragile structure inside of a dark framed border, drawing us into this eerie, luminous space created by the washes of watercolor. Now, as I said, the Bauhaus school focused a lot on promoting a unification of art and industry, but Klee's relationship with technology was a bit more ambivalent. Twittering Machine feels like a sort of satirical commentary on the industrial age. By merging nature, the singing birds, with a machine, the crank mechanism, Klee is sort of showing us the absurdity of attempting to industrialize and automate natural beauty. Imagine turning that crank and moving the birds, causing them to bob up and down, producing a mechanical imitation of a song rather than genuine nature. Something interesting about the creation of the work, Klee used a technique known as an oil transfer, which kind of he invented. He coated a sheet of paper with black oil paint, then place a clean sheet of paper underneath it, and trace a preparatory drawing on top with the stylus. The pressure transferred the wet oil paint to the bottom sheet, creating a soft, slightly blurred, but kind of unique texture that was sort of like a printing method. And then he applied the washes of watercolor to give it a little bit of depth and color. He created this particular piece in 1922 while he was working at the Bauhaus, and it was purchased by the National Gallery in Berlin in 1923. It was displayed there until the Nazi regime seized it in 1937, declaring it degenerate art. While many of those pieces were destroyed, Twittering Machine was actually sold by the Nazi government to an art dealer to raise foreign currency for the regime. It was bought by an American collector and eventually acquired by the Museum of Modern Art in 1939, making it one of the earliest of Klee's work to find a permanent home in a major U.S. institution. This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.